All right, Jen, thank you. Now we're going to go back to CBS 6 Capitol reporter Kimberly Howard, who we said is in New York City, and she's joining us by phone. And Kimberly, let's get back to this. What do we know at this hour?
Well, Julia, the indictment is 35 pages long, and it details 5 counts against the Speaker, all corruption charges, including bribery, conspiracy, and fraud. It says Silver used his position as one of the most powerful politicians in New York to obtain millions of dollars in bribes and kickbacks, which were masked as legitimate income through Silver's position as a private lawyer. The complaint states this all dates back about 15 years, back to 2000. In a statement, Silver's attorney, Joe Cohen, called these charges meritless, saying, quote, Mr. Silver looks forward to responding to them in court and ultimately his full exoneration. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, who has been looking into potential corruption of the Capitol since he took over the work of the Moreland Commission, has been looking to this specifically. Lawmakers earning outside salaries outside of their state salaries, rather. We know that last year Silver reported making close to $750,000 with his work at the law firm Whites in Luxembourg. But these allegations are connected to another law firm which specializes in real estate tax deductions. So U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara is holding a briefing at 1, which we're headed to right now. We're expected to get a lot more information then, and we're also expecting Silver to appear in federal court at 2. As I know Jen mentioned, we'll have much more on this coming up on air, as well as
himself. Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, accused of pocketing millions in bribes and kickbacks and using your tax dollars to make it all happen.
I am confident that when all the issues are aired, I will be vindicated.
He should step down and resign. This is a distraction. And if any part of these charges are true, it is a shame.
Tonight, the chaos unfolding and the clever scheme investigators say Silver used to pull it off. Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver is out on bail after being taken away by federal investigators and appearing in court just hours ago. Tonight, we have team coverage surrounding the Speaker's arrest. Our Kimberly Howard was inside the courtroom today as Silver faced the judge. Our Jennifer Lukey is covering all the chaos erupting at the Howard, by the way, was the only local reporter inside the courtroom as Silver faced that federal judge today. Kimberly joins us live now from Manhattan with exactly what went down both inside and outside the courthouse. Kimberly, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Cody, the appearance itself only lasted about 15 minutes, but we were in there before it got underway, so we got a chance to really watch Silver closely, and he was pretty much expressionless as he sat in between his 2 attorneys, only speaking to them quietly a few times before the judge entered the room. And when the judge did come in, he, of course, read Silver his rights, telling him that, he had the right to remain silent and also to have the right to attorney, which obviously he has obtained. 2, other than that, his attorney spoke for him. The judge laid out those charges, 5 counts in all: wire fraud, mail fraud, 2 conspiracy counts, and extortion. We know Silver surrendered his passport. The judge said any travel beyond New York, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. will be monitored. The judge says he has to give 48 hours notice before he goes beyond any of those 3 places, so he's definitely being watched closely. And after his court appearance, he only had one thing to say. Take a listen.
I'm happy the issue is coming to be aired in the legal process. And I am confident that when all the issues are aired, I will be vindicated. Thank you.
Here's what happened after. Silver was rushed by reporters as he tried to cross the street and get into his SUV. Several reporters shouting, "Are you innocent? Will you resign?" To which it appeared Silver didn't have much of anything to say. The only statements he's really said was what he said right when he came out of the federal courthouse. And I also want to mention that there was no official plea entered in court today. The U.S. Attorney's Office says that's not necessary at this time because these counts are complaints. So we may hear more about that later on because we know that a preliminary court hearing has been scheduled for next month for February 23rd. And we also know that U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara has said that each of these counts could carry a maximum sentence of 20 years behind bars. So should he be convicted of this, he could be spending the rest of his life in prison. We're live in New York City. Kimberly Howard, Cody.
Capitol correspondent Kimberly Howard is down in New York City, in Manhattan, where Silver was arrested and brought to court today. Kimberly, you were in the courtroom today with the Speaker. What was the mood there, and what did you see?
Yeah, well, Cody, these are really serious allegations, but the Speaker really didn't show much emotion while he was in court. He kind of sat quietly in between his two attorneys, speaking to both of them. Nothing audible, though, until the judge spoke to him, and then he basically gave some indicator that he had understood what the judge had said. Other than that, his only real audible and public statement was that statement that you heard earlier, that he believes that he will be vindicated. But these are some very serious charges, so we know that this is going to be a pretty long road ahead.
You said, you touched on that, very serious. 5 federal charges against the Speaker right now. What type of penalties could he be facing if he's convicted?
Well, the U.S. Attorney was saying that each of those counts could face a maximum of 20 years. And so we have these 5 counts. We have wire fraud, mail fraud, 2 conspiracy, and an extortion charge at 20 years each. He obviously could be looking at the rest of his life behind bars should he be convicted. But I also want to mention that there was no plea entered today. The attorney's office says that wasn't necessary. These counts are really a complaint, and so they didn't need for him to enter a plea, although we do know that there will be another hearing, and we could see that as we continue with this, a preliminary court hearing, which will be next month.
It's an interesting point. And, Silver is out on bail right now. What is his life going to be like now that he's been indicted, essentially?
Well, guarded, Cody, I guess is a word for it, because he surrendered his passport, so he can't leave the country. And the judge said that if he's going to be traveling anywhere else but New York, New Jersey, or Washington, D.C., that he has to give the feds 48 hours notice, and that those journeys would be monitored. So if he is making a trip from New York to Washington, D.C., obviously there's a few states in between there, he'd have to give that 48-hour notice, and those trips would have to be monitored, so they'd have to be watching him very, very closely. So guarded, I really would be the word for it, I guess, from here on out.
Silver didn't say much when he talked to reporters and talked to you down in Manhattan today. Was there any indication about his plans when it comes to keeping the speakership, to remain Speaker in the Assembly?
Well, several of us were yelling at him, are you going to resign? And he didn't say much to that when he was trying to get into his SUV. But you did hear that very public statement that he did say at the makeshift podium there, where he said that he believes that he will be vindicated. So he is basically publicly saying that he believes that he is innocent. And one can only imagine that should he be found innocent, he, of course, would stay in his position. He wouldn't feel any need to step down from his
position. Is CBS 6 News.
Corruption charges rocking the state capitol right now, and the U.S. Attorney says you paid for it.
The show me the money culture of Albany has been perpetuated and promoted at the very top of the political food chain.
Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver facing the possibility of a century behind bars, accused of using his office to make millions in bribes and kickbacks.
Local lawmakers right now calling for Silver's ouster.
I don't think there's a lot of love for this speaker on the Democrat side, but there is a lot of fear, and maybe that fear will dissipate now.
What it looked like inside federal court as Speaker Silver stood in front of the judge.
Plus, the way investigators say he cooked up the entire scheme and how the shutdown of the Moreland Commission forced them to dig deeper. CBS 6 News starts right now.
And good evening. I'm Greg Floyd.
And I'm Tori Wells. We have a team of reporters covering each angle of this still very developing story for you right now. Kimberly Howard is live in New York City. She was in the courtroom as the Speaker answered a laundry list of corruption charges.
And Jennifer Lukey live in our Capitol newsroom. She is digging deeper into the Moreland Commission and its links.
Speaker Sheldon Silver is free on $200,000 bail right now after facing a federal judge in Manhattan just hours ago. Our Kimberly Howard was the only local reporter in that Manhattan courtroom, and she joins us live right now. And Kimberly, what did it feel like inside that room?
Well, you know, Tori, the court appearance itself was very short. It was only 15 minutes. But before it got underway, I had the opportunity to sit in the bench and kind of watch Silver closely as he sat in between his two attorneys. He really was expressionless for the most part and quiet, only turning to his attorneys a couple of times, quietly speaking with them until the judge came in, of course, and then at that point he stood up and basically the only audible thing he said inside the courtroom was when the judge was explaining his charges and asked him if he understood, and he said that he did. But for the most part, after that, it was his two attorneys that were doing the talking for him as those counts were detailed. 5 very serious counts, as Greg mentioned, each carrying up to 20 years in prison as far as a sentence is concerned. And it got pretty crazy after this. It was a quiet hearing. He came to the podium, though, to this makeshift podium that the media had set up, and said one statement. And here's what he had to say when he walked out of court.
I'm happy the issue is coming to be aired in the legal process. And I am confident that when all the issues are aired, I will be vindicated. Thank you.
So you can hear him there kind of publicly declaring his innocence. After that, didn't say much to the media, although the media tried to get answers. Reporters shouting at him, will he resign? He ran across the street. We ran across the street chasing him towards his SUV. Didn't say much after that, but it got pretty crazy out here after that. So we have a long road ahead. We know that there's going to be a court hearing next month. At this point, no official plea has been entered. We're live in Manhattan.
Well, after facing a federal judge in Manhattan just hours ago, Silver said that he's confident that he will be vindicated of these charges.
Kimberly Howard was inside the courtroom with the speaker this afternoon. She joins us live from New York City right now.
Kimberly, plenty of drama there for a very brief courtroom appearance.
That's true, Greg and Tori. It only lasted about 15 minutes, but before it got started, we had a good opportunity to really look at Silver closely and kind of see how he was reacting to all of these serious allegations. Motionless before that hearing got underway, basically only speaking with his attorneys very quietly a few times before the judge walked in. And once the judge did walk in, he started detailing those 5 very serious counts, which include wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. We know that Silver had to surrender his passport and that all of his travel within the United States pretty much is going to be monitored. He has to give the feds 48 hours notice if he's going to be traveling anywhere outside of New York, New Jersey, or Washington, D.C. So we know that he's going to be watched very closely. But once he came out of court, he spoke to the media quickly, basically proclaiming his innocence, saying, as you mentioned, that he's confident that he's going to be vindicated. And then a media frenzy, reporters, all of us throwing questions at him. Are you going to resign? What comes next for you? Are you innocent? The speaker didn't have much to say as he got into his SUV and drove away, but really a chaotic scene outside the courthouse after a pretty quiet and quick day in court. I also want to mention that no plea was entered today. The U.S. Attorney's Office says that no plea needs to be entered yet. It's not required, but we are expecting a lot more to happen as this unveils further down the road. We know that he's going to be back in federal court next month on February 23rd. And, of course, we'll stay on this for you. For now, we are live in Manhattan. Kimberly Howard, CBS.
The speaker is out on $200,000 bail tonight. He did face a judge this afternoon in the city and briefly spoke to reporters afterward. Kimberly Howard was the only local reporter in that Manhattan courtroom today.
Speaker Sheldon Silver's appearance in federal court only lasted about 15 minutes, but in that time, the judge detailed some serious corruption charges. 5 counts, among them wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. The U.S. Attorney's Office says each of those counts carries a maximum 20-year prison sentence. Silver surrendered his passport, and his travel within the U.S. will be limited and monitored by the feds. While in court, Silver remains emotionless, only speaking quietly with his 2 attorneys. But outside, he declared his innocence.
I'm happy the issue is coming to be aired in the legal process. And I am confident that when all the issues are aired, I will be vindicated. Thank you.
That statement followed by a media frenzy.
Speaker, no resignation now.
Silver just drove away. No plea was entered. The U.S. Attorney's Office says that's not yet required. Silver is due back in court on February 23rd. Until then, a hectic time at the Capitol with Republican lawmakers and some Democrats calling for Silver to resign. In Manhattan, Kimberly Howard, CBS 6 News.
One of New York's most powerful politicians.
Sheldon Silver arrested on corruption charges.
Accused of pocketing millions.
The show me the money culture of Albany has been perpetuated.
And CBS 6 was there as the charges were read.
Speaker Silver lied and misled the public.
Count on CBS 6 as the investigation unfolds.
I think we may just be scratching the surface.